David Brucey here with another Three for All, and this is three Tony Iommi licks from 1978. And of course, we're going to be talking about Black Sabbath. And I think, most people agree. I mean, Tony Iommi really is the godfather of metal, even though there are musical historians and purists that try to trace it back and they want to name somebody other than Black Sabbath, it seems. And yeah, there were groups in the late 60s, the acid rock, phase and craze. Vanilla Fudge and Moby Grape and even Led Zeppelin, were pushing that envelope. And they were pushing rock music toward this uncharted territory, which became known as heavy metal. But I think with Sabbath, when they hit the scene, they had the complete picture. They had the dark, heavy riffs, the gothic lyrics, writing about death and war and the devil and all this stuff. And it was the complete package, whatever everybody was kind of fumbling around, and then when Black Sabbath hit it, everybody stopped and took notice, like wow, because it was brand new. The licks in this lesson came from footage from Black Sabbath's 1978 Never Say Die tour, and that was a historic, Black Sabbath tour for a few reasons. Never Say Die was technically the last album that Ozzy appeared on until they reformed and, had a reunion. But it was also the last tour that Ozzy appeared on. Ozzy was booted out of Black Sabbath. They eventually hired Ronnie James Dio and kind of reformed the band. But the other footnote that's interesting is it was technically Van Halen's first tour. And, Van Halen opened for Black Sabbath in that 78, road run. And Black Sabbath was touring Never Say Die. Van Halen was supporting, their first album. And historically, that's been known as a very crazy and wild, just full of partying and wild, rock and roll debauchery. And I would love to be a fly on the wall to capture, some of that, or have, like recordings or something, just so you could see some of the partying and the excess and just the wild antics. Yesterday, the news broke about Eddie Van Halen passing away, so I wanted to take a second and just have a moment of silence for Eddie, because that was devastating news. I wasn't expecting it. I was already kind of having an off day, and then when I caught that, it just completely bummed me out. So I'm a little, out of sorts today, but, I totally had plans to make this lesson before that news hit. And then when the news hit, I thought, well, I have to do that lesson now because, in a roundabout way, it's also a tribute to Eddie Van Halen. Right, the first lick is this crammed, kind of frantic, hybrid pentatonic idea. And definitely, I think the Heartbreaker solo from Led Zeppelin, I think honestly just blew everybody's minds. And I definitely remember reading Eddie Van Halen and Steve Vai and a lot of other guitarists. When they heard that solo, they were just blown away and totally inspired. And definitely Iommi's a big Clapton fan, but he's also a Jimmy Page fan too. And this reminds me of Jimmy Page, something like this. One more time there. And it's just crammed in there. He's just frantically flying around the fretboard. So it starts with this. Just this quick little pull-off lick. And then he starts doing the crazy pentatonic stuff. And definitely Tony's a guitarist to watch because he does these crazy, finger gymnastics where he trills notes and he does these really quick, hammer-ons and pull-offs. And it just might sound like a big garble of notes, but there is kind of a, there is a pattern or a sequence involved. The next lick's another crammed hybrid pentatonic idea, and it's pretty obvious where this came from once again, because the first sequence is technically a Jimmy Page lick. And once again, Tony is just flying through this, just cramming as many notes in there as he can. Something like this. can see this is the Jimmy Page lick, this thing. And he basically moves that along, 3 different strings. He does it on the high E, and then on the B and the G, and then on the G and the D. So right there, you've got this. And when you come down after that G string, it's like he's kind of doing, a little bit more of the hybrid pentatonic there. And where he's grabbing, the major 7th, and he's also grabbing the flat 5 down there. And then when he goes back up, he just kind of sticks with the regular pentatonic. Something like that. And here's the clip from '78 with Tony just blazing through that. It's crazy. The next example, we're actually going to look at Tony's favorite Pentatonic Highway. And I devoted a couple episodes of Scales and Tales to the Pentatonic Highway. And definitely Tony, if you watch him play, some of this footage I found from '78, I caught him doing this all the time, during that concert. But one thing he likes to do, we're in the key of A, and there's your A minor pentatonic box. But what Tony likes to do is he'll grab, a few of the lower notes here, this G and A, out of the previous position, because there's your box. So he'll drift down here, grab this G and A, and then shift his way up through A minor pentatonic. Something like that. And you can definitely see him playing out of the box and then slip into those lower positions and then play out of the box and then slip into the higher ones too. So he kind of visits both halves, the lower part and the higher part. And another thing that Tony really likes to do are what I call flutters, and you'll catch Ace Frehley and a whole bunch of other guitarists doing this too. And it's just a quick hammer-on pull-off like this. And there we can catch a little piece of this extended, pentatonic scale. And right there, I kind of use that shift slide to get back to that C note. And you can also use that in ascend through the scale too, and go through it like that. And you can mix them around, you can kind of decide where you want to shift and do the slide, where you want to do the pull-off. And definitely Tony made, just endless variations of those ideas, using that kind of scale path as a guide. This next idea is pretty cool, and Tony is a master at these bending and vibrato, expressive phrases, and it's something like this. One more time there. And he's basically starting with the C and D and then bends that D up a whole step. And then you're going to shift and slide into the 12th fret there on that B note, and then grab the C and the D and then bend that D up a whole step again. Something like that. And this part's really cool. And he's basically playing a melody, but he's doing it with bending. But instead of fretting it like that, he's kind of sneaking some bends in there. Really expressive and so unusual, but I like that. Here's a bonus lick, and this actually came from 1991, and it was an instructional video called Careful with That Axe. And I think Robert Fripp and some other guitarists, have kind of been featured on that. That was back in the 90s. So technically Tony is tuned down a half step, and he's playing out of the E minor pentatonic box right here. I didn't bother to retune, my guitar just for this one lick. So I just moved everything down one fret to play it in E flat. Just a heads up, but it's something like this. One more time. So he starts it with this really typical kind of pentatonic bending lick. And then once he does that little, E flat to D flat back to E flat, then he almost does a variation of what we started with, from lick 1 with this. He basically does that 6 times. And then ends it with this little... That's going to wrap this look at 3 Tony Iommi licks from 1978, and definitely, Tony Iommi is a legend, a very important guitarist, very influential, very respected, and I think, definitely the older fans and stuff, they know, because they were there and they saw, what happened. And then the younger fans, they look back and they kind of scratch their head and they don't fully understand simply because they weren't there or they weren't around. So I can't really imagine what it must have been like to hear rock, and then it kind of changed into psychedelic, acid rock, and then the next thing you knew, it became heavy metal. And, now we kind of take it for granted, but back then, it was groundbreaking. It just blew everybody's mind because they'd never heard anything like that before. The dark, ominous riffs and this heavy, heavy tone and fuzzy, guitar solos and stuff. And just the lyrics and everything else, the imagery, everything. It definitely changed the world and changed music forever. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.